We live our lives with our eyes open, but there are days when the sky gets dark and we would rather close them forever. The day they killed my mother inside, they killed a part of me too. The difference is that I live to tell the story. Good morning, my loves. This is Grandma Janina. 78 years very well lived, with some worry lines, but also many smiles, you know? I was born in 1947 in Joinville, Santa Catarina, at a time when we didn't even have proper electricity. Today is the first time I will tell this complete story, this story that I have kept deep in my chest for more than 60 years. Oh, my dears, before we start, tell me in the comments where you are watching this video from. Are you from Rio Grande do Sul, Paraná, or maybe even Portugal? I want to meet each one of you. And if you could leave a like and subscribe to the channel, Grandma here would be very happy. This gives me strength to continue telling these stories that sometimes hurt, but that can help someone who is going through something similar. I would also like to know how old you are. Comment below. Now let's get down to business. My mother, Jacqueline, was the most beautiful woman in Joinville. No one had any doubt about that. Black, straight hair, long to her waist, green eyes, so rare at that time, that people said she had cat eyes, and a smile, my children, a smile that lit up the entire block. Our house was simple but cozy. It was close to the textile factory, where my father, Jusmiro, worked. We were a small family. Me, my mother, my father and my older brother, Julio, who was 7 years older than me. Our life wasn't easy, but Mom made it seem like everything was a party. I remember her kitchen as if it were yesterday. There weren't any of today's modern conveniences, no. It was a wood stove, a solid wood table that my father had made, and an old cupboard that she always kept well organized. Every Saturday she made a cornmeal cake with anise, which was mouth-watering just from the smell of it spreading through the house. Janina, come here and help your mother. She called and I ran, happy to be able to be close to her. I was kind of clumsy. I still am, let's agree, but she had the patience of a saint. Not like that, daughter. Look, it's slow and gentle. She said as she taught me how to knead bread dough. His mother worked as a seamstress, taking orders from the city's rich ladies. I would stay up late at night hunched over that Singer's sewing machine, pedaling non-stop. Sometimes, when she thought I was already asleep, I would hear her cough, a dry, strong cough, which she tried to muffle with a cloth so as not to wake anyone up. Today I know that that cough was the beginning of the end, but back then who would have imagined? Mother had a special way of telling stories. At night, when work was over, she would sit on the edge of my bed and tell me about Casi Pereira, the headless mule, and Ira. I pretended to be scared just so she could hug me and say, "You don't have to be scared, my daughter. As long as I'm here, nothing bad will happen to you." Oh, how I wish that were true. My fondest memories are of Sundays. That was the only day my mother didn't work. In the morning, we would go to church. She was very Catholic, she never missed a single mass. Then we would go back home, where she would prepare a special lunch. In the afternoon, when the heat had subsided, she would take me to the central square. There was a bandstand there where a band would sometimes play and we would sit and listen to music, eating popcorn. It was on one of those Sunday afternoons that we met Mrs. Teresa. She had just moved to Joinville from Curitiba. She was a teacher, spoke beautifully, and wore colorful dresses that caught people's attention. Her mother and she hit it off right away. Soon, Mrs. Teresa was a regular visitor to our house, drinking coffee, helping her mother with the most difficult sewing, and bringing me books. "This girl is smart, Jacqueline," she would say to my mother. "You have to study, go far." Her mother smiled proudly. "God willing, she will be someone in life. She won't have to be like me, bent over a sewing machine until dawn." It was a beautiful dream, but life has a cruel way of interrupting dreams, doesn't it? In the winter of 1960, when I was 13, my mother's cough got worse. It wasn't just at night, hidden away, it was all the time, day and night, and it was bloody. I would see her washing the clothes in the sink, trying to hide it from everyone, but I knew. Her face, which had always been flushed, was getting pale, almost transparent. Her dresses started to get loose on her body, which was getting thinner every day. "It's nothing, my dear," she would say when I asked. "It's just a bad flu that won't go away." But it wasn't the flu, it was tuberculosis. At that time it was almost a death sentence, especially for those who didn't have money for treatment. My father didn't want to know. It will pass, he would say, without even looking at me. Her. He was never a loving man, but he wasn't bad either. At least not until then. He worked hard, brought home the money, didn't drink much, but had a reserved, quiet demeanor. My brother, Julio, was his baby. The two were similar not only in appearance, but in their ways as well. His mother was getting worse every day. It got to a point where she couldn't get out of bed anymore. That's when Mrs. Teresa took action. Without telling anyone, she brought a doctor who was a friend of hers to see her mother. I'll never forget the look on the doctor's face after examining her mother. He left the room, called Mrs. Teresa and my father aside and spoke softly, as if he didn't want me to hear. But I heard. It's very advanced. I would need to be hospitalized. But even so, a matter of weeks, maybe days, my world collapsed at that moment. I was only 13 years old, but I understood perfectly what that meant. My mother was dying and there was nothing anyone could do. The days that followed were a slow-motion nightmare, my mother wasting away in that bed, getting weaker and weaker. I sat next to her, holding her hand, watching life slip through her fingers. Dad hardly ever came home, he stayed at work late, then went to the bar. Julio came and went, restless, nervous, as if his mother's illness were an inconvenience in his life. It was Dona Teresa who took care of everything. She came every day, bringing medicine to ease the pain, ready-made food and, most importantly, affection and dignity in my mother's last days. One night, Mom called me over. Her voice was just a whisper. "Janina, my daughter, Mom is going to have to go. But I want you to know one thing. You were the greatest joy in my life. Never forget that." I tried to tell her that she wasn't going anywhere, that she would get better, but the words choked in my throat. Deep down, I knew it was a lie. "When I'm no longer here," she continued, "look for Teresa. She promised to look after you." I didn't quite understand what she meant by that at the time. At the time. Why would I need Dona Teresa if I had my father and my brother, but my mother, even when she was sick, even when she was dying, could see what I couldn't. The next morning, July 17, 1960, I found my mother very quiet in bed. I called out to her and shook her gently, but she didn't answer. She had left during the night, alone, in silence, as she had lived most of her life. The scream that came out of my throat woke up the entire neighborhood. My father came running, still smelling of the kashika from the night before. When he saw the scene, he fell to his knees beside the bed, finally showing some emotion. Dona Teresa arrived soon after. She was the one who organized everything. The coffin, the wake in our living room, as was customary at the time, the simple burial in the city cemetery. She was the one who held me when they threw dirt over my mother's coffin. When I felt that I also wanted to be down there with her, we went back home after the burial, a house that no longer seemed the same without my mother's presence. The silence was deafening. Dona Teresa wanted to stay with me, but my father said it wasn't necessary, that family matters should be resolved within the family. She hugged me tightly, whispered in my ear that she would be back the next day and left, leaving me alone with my father and brother. That's when the nightmare really began. But that's what I'll tell you in the next part of this story, my dears, because there are things that we need to take a breath before remembering. My mother's memories are like a patchwork quilt. Each colorful little piece brings back a moment, a smile, a lesson she taught me. And even after so much time, the longing still tightens my chest in a way that hurts. But as she always said, we cry what we have to cry. Then we dry the tears and move on. And that's what I did, my loves. I moved on, even when it seemed impossible. I think there are wounds that never heal completely, they just become numb with time. And this part of my story is the deepest wound I carry. But I promised to tell you everything, but I didn't. Was it? So let's go. That night, after my mother's funeral, the house seemed like a cold, silent tomb, as if her soul had been ripped out along with her departure. I was in my room, lying on the bed, my eyes swollen from crying so much. I couldn't sleep, I couldn't eat, I couldn't even breathe properly from so much pain. Around 9 p.m., I heard footsteps in the hallway. The door to my room opened and there was my father. I thought maybe he had come to comfort me, something he had never done before. Who knows, maybe his mother's death had awakened some kind of paternal feeling in him. But one look at his face was enough to tell me that something was very wrong. His eyes were red, not from crying, but from drinking. His breath smelled of cachucas so strong that I could smell it even though he was standing in the doorway. In his hands he held a half-empty bottle. "It was you," he said, his voice slurred, filled with a hatred I had never seen before. "It was because of you that she got sick." I lay paralyzed in bed, not really understanding what was happening. "What did I do, Dad?" I managed to ask, my voice shaking. "Was she born?" he yelled, entering the room and slamming the door behind him. "If it weren't for you, she wouldn't have to work so hard. You and your demands, always wanting new clothes, a new notebook, different food, that didn't make any sense." I had never been a demanding child, on the contrary, I always understood our situation. I always accepted the little we had with gratitude, but there was no point in arguing. In his mind, clouded by alcohol and distorted grief, I was the one to blame. "Dad," I didn't even finish the sentence. I felt the impact of his hand on my face with such force that I fell off the bed. Never, in all my 13 years, had my father raised his hand to me. Mom would never have allowed it, but Mom was no longer there to protect me. I tried to get up, but he pushed me back to the floor. I saw something in his eyes that chilled me inside. It wasn't just anger, it was something else. Something I couldn't identify at the time, but that today, looking back, I recognize it as desire. A sick desire, mixed with hate and grief. "Now you're going to pay," he said and began to unbuckle his belt. I closed my eyes, thinking I was going to get hit. It would be bad, but I could handle it. That wasn't what he had in mind, my dears. There are things that are hard to tell even after so much time. I'll tell you what's necessary so you can understand what happened. But I apologize if my voice falters a little. I felt the weight of his body on mine, immobilizing me. I felt rough hands tearing my clothes, touching parts of my body that no one had ever touched. I screamed, but he covered my mouth with his hand, muffling any sound. "Shut up," he ordered. "No one will listen to you anyway." I fought with all the strength I had, but what could a 13-year-old girl do against a grown man? I closed my eyes and tried to transport myself to another place, far away from there, closer to my mother, to any place that wasn't that room, that moment. Just when I thought the nightmare was over, the door opened again. For a second, I had hope. Maybe a neighbor had heard something. Maybe it was Mrs. Teresa coming back to see how I was. But it was Julio, my older brother, who I always saw as a protector, even if distant. He stood in the doorway, watching the scene. I was half naked on the floor, crying. My father was pulling himself together. "Dad, what's going on here?" For a brief moment, I thought he was going to help me, that he was going to stop this madness, call the police, do anything. His father looked at him, then at me, and said something I will never forget. "She killed her mother, Julius. This plague killed your mother." I saw my brother's face transform. The initial confusion gave way to an anger that mirrored my father's. He looked at me not as if I was his little sister, but as if I was a demon who had taken from him the person he loved most in the world. "It's true," he said, his voice thick with hatred. "If it weren't for you, she would still be here." What happened next is like a horror movie playing in slow motion in my memory. The two of them, father and son, united not by love, but by hatred directed at me, united by the pain of loss that they didn't know how to process and that they decided to take out on the easiest, most vulnerable target. They took turns on my body as if I were nothing, as if I wasn't human, as if I wasn't a daughter and a sister. The physical pain was unbearable, but even worse was the pain of being betrayed by the people who were supposed to protect me. At some point, I lost consciousness. Maybe it was a defense mechanism of my mind, unable to process so much horror. When I woke up, I was alone in the room. Through the window I saw that it was already morning. My whole body ached. There was blood on the sheets, on my torn clothes, on my thighs. I tried to get up, but I couldn't. Every movement was agony. I heard voices coming from the kitchen. They were having coffee as if nothing had happened, as if they hadn't destroyed the life of a child. The night before. I dragged myself to the bathroom, cleaned myself as best I could with cold water, put on a clean dress that I could barely button, my hands were so shaky. Then I went back to my room and lay down again. I didn't know what to do, where to go, who to turn to. That was how I spent the next 2 days, lying still, alternating between consciousness and unconsciousness, between silent tears and an emptiness that seemed to have no end. I didn't eat, I barely drank any water, I just stared at the ceiling, wishing I would die, wishing that this unbearable pain would somehow end. They would leave in the morning and only come back at night. They left me alone all day, as if I were a broken object that wasn't worth fixing. Sometimes I would hear my father walk down the hall, stop at my bedroom door, and then move on. I would tremble with fear, just thinking that he might come back in. On the third day, after my mother's funeral, I heard a knock on the front door. It was morning. Father and Julio had already left for work. I didn't answer. I didn't have the strength or the will. More knocking, more insistent. Then a key turning in the lock. Someone was entering the house. I curled up in bed, terrified, thinking that maybe they had come back early. "Janina, are you there, girl?" It was Dona Teresa's voice. My heart raced. Mother had told me to look for her, but I didn't even need to. She came to me. "Janina." I heard her footsteps walking through the house, opening doors, looking for me. When she finally opened the door to my room, I tried to hide under the blanket, embarrassed, afraid that she would see what had happened to me. "My God in heaven," she exclaimed when she saw me. "What happened to you, you creature?" I couldn't answer. No words came out, only tears that came back with full force when I saw the worried face of that woman who had been my mother's best friend. She came closer, sat on the edge of the bed, and touched my forehead as if to check if I had a fever. Then, with a sigh, carefully, she pulled the blanket I was clutching so tightly. What she saw must have been shocking. The bruises on my arms, on my face, the poorly buttoned dress revealing more marks on my chest, the blood-stained sheets I didn't have the strength to change. "Who did this to you?" she asked, her voice shaking with rage and horror. "Was it your father? Was it Julio?" I nodded, unable to say the words out loud. "Both of them," she insisted, needing to understand the extent of the horror. I nodded again and saw tears in her eyes. Tears of anger, of sadness, of helplessness. "Your mother was afraid this might happen." She said it quietly, more to herself than to me. "That's why she asked me to look after you. That's why she gave me a spare key. She knew those two better than anyone." It was like a bolt of understanding had struck me. Mother knew. Somehow, she knew what Father and Julio were capable of. Maybe she had seen signs that I, in my innocence as a child, she couldn't see. And in her last moments of life, her greatest fear wasn't dying. But what would happen to me after she was gone? "Let's get out of here right now," Dona Teresa decided, already standing up. "Will they be back by the end of the day?" I nodded, finding the strength to finally speak. "Please, don't leave me alone. Never again," she promised, holding my hands. "You'll never be alone with them again. I'll take care of you, like I promised your mother." She helped me get up, take a shower, put on clean clothes. She took a few of my things, clothes, the picture of my mother that was on the bedside table, my documents that my mother kept in a little box. "Let's go to my house now," she said as she supported me outside. "There you'll be able to rest, recover." Then we decided what to do. Little did I know that this was just the beginning of a much longer journey, that leaving that house was just the first step to escaping the hell that my father and brother had created, that the pain I felt in my body was nothing compared to the battle that I would have to wait to heal the invisible wounds that night had left on my soul. But at that moment, walking slowly through the streets of Joinville, leaning on Dona Teresa, feeling the sun on my face for the first time in days, I could only think of one thing. "Mom, you still take care of me, even from up there." Dona Teresa's house was on the other side of town, in a more remote neighborhood. It was a simple little house, painted yellow, with a wooden fence in front and a small but well-kept garden, so different from my house, which had always been dark and sad, especially after Mom got sick. "You'll be safe here," she told me as she opened the door. "No one will hurt you anymore." I walked in, leaning on her, still feeling pain all over my body. Inside the house, everything was clean and organized. There were books everywhere, on the shelves, stacked on small tables, even on the windowsills. Dona Teresa was a teacher and that was reflected in every corner of that home. She put me in the guest room, which had a single bed with a flowery bedspread and a window that it overlooked the back garden, where a jabuticaba tree laden with fruit swayed in the breeze. She arranged the pillows so I was comfortable and said she was going to make me something to eat. I stared at the ceiling, trying to organize my thoughts. Would my father and Julio come looking for me? Would we be safe there? What would happen to me now that I no longer had a family? Dona Teresa came back with a tray. It had vegetable soup, still warm bread, and a glass of milk. The smell made me realize how hungry I was after days without eating properly. "We need to take you to the doctor," she said as I ate slowly. "These marks on your body need to be documented." I stopped eating, panic taking over me. "I don't want anyone to know," I whispered. "I am embarrassed." She held my hand affectionately. "Janina, what happened to you was not your fault. The shame is not yours, it's theirs. But if we want them to pay for what they did, we need proof." Pay? I hadn't even thought about that yet. In my head, all I could think about was running away, hiding. The idea of facing my father and brother, of telling other people what they had done to me, seemed scarier than anything. "I'm scared," I confessed. Tears coming back to my eyes. What if no one believes me? What if they come after us? Dona Teresa took a deep breath. I saw that she was also scared, but she tried to stay strong for my sake. "Let's do it this way," she proposed. "First I'll take you to the doctor, a friend of mine, Dr. Eugenio, who is discreet and trustworthy. He will examine you and make a record of your injuries. Then, depending on what he says, we decide the next steps." I nodded, lacking the energy to argue. I finished eating in silence, thinking about my mother, wishing she was there to hug me and tell me that everything would be okay. That same afternoon, Mrs. Teresa took me to Dr. Eugenio's office. He was a gentleman with grey hair and a kind look who treated me with such respect and kindness that it made me cry again. He examined me, took notes, took some photographs of the marks on my body, with my permission and always with Mrs. Teresa present. When he finished, he asked to speak to Mrs. Teresa in private. I waited in the examination room, wrapped in a hospital sheet, feeling cold despite the afternoon heat. I don't know exactly what they talked about, but when they returned, Mrs. Teresa had a determined expression on her face. Dr. Eugenio explained to me that I would have to take some medicine to prevent diseases and an unwanted pregnancy. The word pregnancy hit me like a punch. I hadn't even thought about that possibility yet. So immersed was I in the immediate pain. We walked back to her house in silence. My head was spinning with confused thoughts, with fear of the future, with longing for my mother. It was already getting dark when we arrived. Dona Teresa helped me take my medicine, made me comfortable in bed and said she had to go out for an hour, but would be back soon. He left the front door locked, the windows closed, and asked me not to answer if anyone knocked. I was alone in that unfamiliar house, listening to the noises of the night starting outside, my heart tightening. Where could she have gone? Had I gone to talk to my father, to the police? Fear gave way to tiredness and I ended up falling asleep. I woke up to the sound of voices. It must have been late at night. I recognized Dona Teresa's voice, but there was someone else with her. A male voice I couldn't identify. I strained my ears, trying to understand what they were saying. "We can't just leave like that, Geronimo," Dona Teresa said. "They need to pay for what they did." "Teresa, be rational," the male voice replied. "You are talking about a respected man in the city, a long-time employee of the factory. His word against that of a traumatized girl. How do you think this will end? There are the medical records, the photographs, which can be explained in 1,000 ways. An accident, a fall, I don't know. Do you know what justice is like in this city? How do good men protect themselves?" There was a silence and then his voice continued softer. "The girl's best chance is to start over far away from here. I can help you. I have that brother in Porto Alegre, remember? He can arrange a place for you to stay until you get settled." Porto Alegre. It was so far away. The idea of leaving Joinville, the city where I was born and raised, where my mother was buried, gave me a lump in my throat, but at the same time, the prospect of staying there, knowing that my father and Julio could find me at any moment, I didn't hear the rest of the conversation. I ended up falling asleep again, too exhausted to keep my eyes open. The next morning, Mrs. Teresa explained the plan to me. Geronimo was a colleague of hers from the school where she taught, one of the few men she trusted. He had a brother in Porto Alegre who worked at a large school and could help her get a job there. The idea was to go there, start a new life, far from those who hurt me. But what about justice? I asked, remembering the conversation I had overheard the night before. She sighed, running her hand through my hair like her mother used to do. God's justice never fails, Janina. Men's, well, it's complicated. Your father knows a lot of important people in the city, he has friends in the police. Jerome thinks, and I agree, that it would be your word against his. And in a small city like Joinville, in 1960, there was no need to complete the sentence. Even as a child, I understood how the world worked, how people preferred to turn a blind eye to the evil that happened inside their homes, behind closed doors. But we're not leaving just like that. She continued. Let's file a complaint, document what happened. It may not result in anything now, but it is on record. And most importantly, we'll do it in a way that your father can never find you again or claim custody over you. I didn't really understand what she meant by that at the time. Only later did I find out about the complete plan she had devised. That same day, Geronimo came to pick us up in an old car. We went to the police station first, where Mrs. Teresa insisted on filing a formal complaint. The officer on duty, a bored-looking man, barely paid attention as she recounted the horrors that had happened to me. He wrote something down in a notebook, asked us to sign a paper and said he would investigate. I left there feeling dirty and humiliated again. It was like no one cared, like what had happened to me was too insignificant to deserve attention. Then we went to the registry office. Donna Teresa had all my documents, birth certificate, school ID card, which was attached to my father's house. At the registry office, she presented a paper. It's a permission slip your mother signed before she died, she explained to me. Giving me temporary custody of you in case something happened to her. I was surprised. I didn't know Mom had done that, but it made sense. She always worried about protecting me, even knowing she wouldn't be here anymore. The notary examined the document, stamped it, asked Mrs. Teresa to sign some papers and thus, I officially became her legal responsibility. It wasn't a full adoption, that would come later, but it was enough to keep my father from claiming me back. Our last stop was at the cemetery. I needed to say goodbye to my mother before I left. We stood there in front of the simple tombstone that read Jacqueline Silva, 1929 to 1960. Beloved mother, for almost an hour. I cried all the tears I had left. I talked to her in silence. I promised that I would be strong, that I would survive, that I would do everything she had dreamed for me. When we finally got back to the car, it was already getting dark. Jerome looked anxious. We have to go, he insisted. We've been driving around town all day. If her father starts looking, it won't take long for him to find out you were here. Donna Teresa agreed. We got into the car and, as we left Joinville behind, I felt a mixture of relief and sadness. I was leaving behind not only the horror of the last few days, but also all the good memories of my childhood, the places I knew, the city where my mother rested. The trip to Porto Alegre would take almost a whole day. I rested my head on Donna Teresa's shoulder and closed my eyes, exhausted. Through the car window, the lights of Joinville became increasingly distant until they disappeared completely on the horizon. A new life was beginning for me. A life without my mother, but also without the terror that my father and brother represented. A life of uncertainty, but also of possibilities. Everything will be fine, Mrs. Teresa whispered as if she read my thoughts. We are together now. It wasn't with that promise that I fell asleep, as the car took us away from everything I knew, towards a future I couldn't even imagine yet. Porto Alegre seemed huge to me when we arrived after that endless journey. A big, noisy city, full of tall buildings and hurried people who didn't even notice our presence. So different from the peaceful Joinville I knew, where everyone knew everyone else's name. Jerome's brother was called Augusto. He was a math teacher at a private school and lived in a small, cozy apartment in the Cidade Bizan neighborhood. Welcomed us with open arms, even without knowing me, without really knowing what had happened. His kindness reminded me that there were still good men in the world. Something I was starting to doubt. You guys can stay here until you find a place, he said as he showed us the guest room, which would be ours for now. I've already spoken to the principal of the school where I work. There's an opening for a Portuguese teacher next semester. If you want it, Teresa, the position is yours. Donna Teresa thanked him, visibly relieved to have a job prospect. She had savings, but it wouldn't be enough to support us for long. The first few days in Porto Alegre were a blur of mixed emotions. I felt out of place, lost, as if I didn't belong anywhere. I had nightmares almost every night. I woke up screaming, sweaty, reliving the horror of that night after my mother's funeral. Donna Teresa always came running, hugged me, stayed awake with me until I could sleep again. After 2 weeks at Augusto's house, we found an apartment to rent. It was in the same neighborhood, in an old building, on the 3rd floor. It had only one bedroom, a small living room, kitchen, and bathroom. Nothing compared to the spacious house Donna Teresa had in Joinville, but she never complained. "It's a new beginning for both of us," she said as we packed the few things we had. We only brought clothes, a few books and the photographs of my mother that we managed to save. The school semester would start in August. Donna Teresa soon started working at the school that Augusto had recommended. I was supposed to start studying there too, but the idea of being in a place full of teenagers, of having to interact, of having to explain where I came from and why I had changed schools in the middle of the year, all of that terrified me. "I'm not ready," I confessed to her one night after dinner. "I can't imagine walking into a classroom with everyone looking at me." She understood. She always understood. "Let's do it differently. So, this semester I'm going to teach you at home. Next year, when you're feeling better, you can go back to regular school. What do you think?" That's how I spent the next few months, studying at home, with Donna Teresa teaching me all the subjects after she got back from work. She was an incredible teacher, patient, dedicated. She knew how to make even the most boring subjects interesting. Little by little I started to take a real interest in studying, not just out of obligation. I read all the books she recommended to me, I did my homework diligently. It was also a way of escaping. While I studied, I didn't think about the past, about the bad things I had experienced. During that time, Mrs. Teresa also arranged for me to see a psychologist, Dr. Marina. At first, I hated going. I would sit in silence in her office, answering in monosyllables, unable to talk about what had happened. "You don't have to tell everything at once," Dr. Marina told me in one of the first sessions. "Let's start by talking about easier things. Tell me about your mother." And so, week after week, I started to unfreeze. I talked about my mother, about the good memories of my childhood, about how I was adapting to Porto Alegre. Until one day, almost 6 months after starting therapy, I was able to talk about that night. The words came out like a flood, mixed with tears and sobs. When I finished, I felt exhausted, but also relieved, as if a huge weight had been lifted off my shoulders. "You are very brave, Janina," Dr. Marina told me that day. "Surviving what you survived already requires immense strength, but being able to talk about it facing this pain head-on, that is true courage." I didn't feel brave. I felt broken, damaged, as if something fundamental had been ripped away from me. But her words planted a seed that years later would grow and bear fruit. Time went by. In January 1961, I turned 14. Donna Teresa baked a small cake, bought a present, a book of poetry that I still keep today, and we sang Happy Birthday, just the two of us, in our cramped little classroom. It was a simple but sincere celebration, the first of many we would have together over the years. The following year, I finally felt ready to go back to school. I started the 8th grade, at the same school where Donna Teresa taught. It was difficult at first. I was the new student, the different one, the one who had it, but little by little I made friends, adapted to the pace of the classes, found my place. One classmate in particular, Clarice, became very close to me. She had also lost her mother, although under very different circumstances. This shared pain created a bond between us. With her I could talk about things that I didn't know. I didn't talk to anyone else. "I hate it when people say it will pass." Clarice said it one day while we were sitting on a bench in the schoolyard. "Missing someone doesn't go away, we just learn to live with it." That's exactly how I felt. Missing my mother was a constant presence, a silent companion that walked beside me every day. It wasn't always painful, sometimes it was just a gentle melancholy, an acute awareness of everything she had lost by leaving so soon, of everything I had lost by not having her by my side. The high school years passed in the blink of an eye. I discovered that I had a talent for languages and literature. I loved writing poems, short stories, anything. It was a form of expression, of expressing feelings that I couldn't always verbalize. When the time came to decide what to do after school, I had no doubts. I wanted to be a teacher like Donna Teresa. I wanted to do for other children's lives what she had done for mine. Open doors, show paths, be a safe haven. I passed the entrance exam for UFRGS to study literature in 1965. It was one of the happiest days of my life so far. Donna Teresa cried with pride when she saw my name on the list of successful candidates in the newspaper. "Your mother would be so proud," she said as she hugged me. So proud. College opened up a whole new world for me. I met all kinds of people. I read books I had never heard of. I participated in heated debates about politics, art, and philosophy. These were turbulent times in Brazil. The military dictatorship had begun the year before, and the university was one of the few places where ideas could still be discussed freely, albeit cautiously. It was there that I met Ricardo in my second year of college. He was a law student, 2 years older than me, and had the kindest eyes I had ever seen. We met at a party organized by the university. I was sitting in a corner, feeling a bit out of place, as I always did at social events, when he approached me and started a conversation. At first, I was defensive. After what I had been through, the idea of approaching any man romantically terrified me. But Ricardo was different from anyone I had ever met. Patient, respectful, and never pressured me. We talked for hours about books, music, and dreams for the future. It took me almost a year to agree to go out with him alone. Our first date was at a cafe near the university. I was so nervous that I spilled my coffee on the table, staining my new dress. Instead of being embarrassed, Ricardo laughed, not at me, but at the situation, and made me laugh too. It was the first time in a long time that I felt normal, like any other young woman, on a regular date, without the weight of the past weighing me down. Even so, it took me a long time to tell him about what had happened in Joinville. I was afraid of his reaction, afraid that he would look at me differently, with pity or disgust. When I finally got the courage, 2 years after we started dating, he just held my hands and said, "Thank you for trusting me enough to share this. It doesn't change anything I feel for you." At that moment, I knew I had found someone special. We graduated in 1969. I in literature, he in law. We got married the following year in a small ceremony at the local church. Donna Teresa, who at this point I already called mother, cried throughout the ceremony. "Two mothers bless you today," she told me. Me, from here, and Jacqueline, from up there. Ricardo started working at a law firm specializing in human rights. A risky job during the dictatorship, but one he did with passion and conviction. I got a job as a teacher at a state school, fulfilling the dream I had had since I was a teenager. Our first son, Eduardo, was born in 1972. When I held him in my arms for the first time, I felt such great love that it almost didn't fit in my chest, but I also felt fear. What would it be like as a mother, without having had my own example for so long? Would I know how to protect him, raise him right, give him all the love he deserved? Ricardo noticed my insecurity. "You have the best possible example," he reminded me. "You had two extraordinary mothers who showed you what unconditional love is. Plus, you're the strongest person I know. Our son is lucky to have you." His words calmed me down, but it was really the daily experience, the contact with that little being so dependent and so full of life, that taught me how to be a mother. Each of Eduardo's smiles, each discovery, each achievement from the first tooth to the first step, was healing something inside me that I didn't even know was still broken. In 1975, our family grew with the arrival of Clara. Unlike her brother, who was calm and observant, Clara was pure energy from day one. He spoke early, walked early, and was soon running around the house, turning everything upside down with his insatiable curiosity. Life went on with the normal joys and challenges of any family. Ricardo became a partner at the firm. I was promoted to pedagogical coordinator of the school. We bought a small but comfortable house in the Menino Diaz neighborhood. Donna Teresa, now retired, came to visit us almost every day, being the grandmother my children never had on their father's side. Ricardo's parents had passed away before we even met, but the past, no matter how much we try to bury it, has a habit of resurfacing when we least expect it. In 1980, almost 20 years after we fled Joinville, I received a letter. The sender was a notary in that city. I opened it with trembling hands, my heart racing. It was a notification. My father had passed away. As a daughter, I was the legal heir to his assets, the house where I grew up, and a small savings account. The letter had been sent to several addresses before finding me, probably following the trail of records I had left over the years. I stared at that paper for hours, not knowing what to feel. There was no pain, no relief, no anger. Just a strange emptiness, as if I were reading about a stranger, not the man I once called father, the man who destroyed my childhood in a single night of hatred and madness. What do you want to do? Ricardo asked when I told him. I don't want anything from him, I replied without hesitation. Nothing. The next day I wrote a letter formally renouncing the inheritance. I didn't want that house, those memories, that money. I didn't want any connection to that man or the past I had left behind so long ago. The letter mentioned that my brother, Julio, had died years before in a car accident. I didn't feel anything when I read this either. Those blood ties had been irreparably severed on that fateful night in July 1960. My true family was different now. Ricardo, our children, Mrs. Teresa, people who truly loved me, who would never hurt me. Life continued its course. The children grew up, the dictatorship ended, the country changed slowly. In 1990, Mrs. Teresa had a stroke. Take care of her as she had taken care of me so many years before, with love, patience, dedication. She left peacefully, 2 years later, holding my hand, calling me daughter, until her last breath. Burying her was like losing my mother for the second time. More different from the first time, when I was alone with my pain. Now I had an entire family supporting me, reminding me that the love she gave me would continue to live on in me, in my children and one day in their children. And that was how, over the decades, I built a life that I never imagined I would have on that dark night in Joinville. A life with pain and scars. Yes, some that never disappeared completely, but also with a lot of love, a lot of joy, a lot of achievements. A life that was only possible because a brave and determined woman kept the promise she made to my mother. A life that I built step by step, brick by brick, transforming trauma into strength, pain into compassion, fear into courage. You know, my dears, when we suffer a very big trauma in childhood, it seems like our life is divided into two parts, before and after that moment. For a long time, I thought I would be forever defined by that terrible night, that I would carry that open wound for the rest of my life. But time is a powerful medicine and love, oh, love is the best healer there is. As my children entered their teens, I began to feel a different fear. Eduardo, at 13, reminded me so much of the age I was when I lost my mother, when everything fell apart. I started having nightmares again, getting anxious, overprotective. You're not going to let him breathe like that. Ricardo kindly alerted me one night after I had called 3 times to the friend's house where Eduardo was studying. Our children are not living the same story that you lived. He was right, of course. But fear does not obey logic. That's when I decided to go back to therapy after so many years. I needed to resolve this knot inside me, this irrational fear that my children could suffer the same thing I suffered. The new therapist, unlike Dr. Marina from my adolescence, worked with a more direct approach. Are you punishing your children for their father's crimes? She told me in one of the first sessions. You are depriving them of the freedom and normal experiences of their age because of your fear. That hit me like a bolt of lightning. That's exactly what I was doing. And it wasn't fair to them. How can I overcome this? I asked, desperate for a solution, recognizing that your story is not their destiny, that you broke the cycle, that the home you and Ricardo built is safe, loving, healthy. It was a slow process, painful at times, but liberating. I started to slowly let go of the reins. I let Eduardo go to school alone. It allowed Clara to sleep at her friends' houses. Every little bit of independence I granted them was also a gift to myself, a gradual release from the fear that held me captive. In 1992, I made a decision that would change the course of my professional life. After more than 20 years as a teacher and coordinator, I decided to return to university to do a master's degree in education. Ricardo supported me unconditionally, as always. It's never too late to follow your dreams, he used to say. At 45, I went back to being a student. It was strange at first, being one of the oldest students in the class, but I soon adapted. My dissertation was on the impact of childhood trauma on educational development, a topic I knew intimately, not just from books, but from my own experience. It was during my research for my master's degree that I had an epiphany. Talking to educators, psychologists, and social workers, I realized how many children went through situations of abuse without anyone intervening, without having a Mrs. Teresa to save them. I thought about my own story and how different things could have been if someone, a teacher, a neighbor, any adult, had noticed the signs earlier. After completing my master's degree in 1994, I didn't go back to school. Instead, I started working with the Municipal Department of Education, developing training programs for teachers to identify signs of abuse and domestic violence. It was a job I was passionate about, which gave purpose to all the pain I had experienced. You turned your wound into a mission. Ricardo commented proudly later, watching me lead a workshop for municipal school principals. But it wasn't just at work that I found purpose. My greatest achievement, my greatest pride, was my family. Seeing my children grow up healthy, safe, and loved. It was living proof that I had managed to break the cycle of violence, that the past didn't need to determine the future. Eduardo graduated in medicine in 1996. Seeing my son in a white coat, ready to care for and heal others, filled me with a pride that I can't even describe. Clara chose a different path. Always artistic and creative, she decided to study film and became a documentary filmmaker. Her films on social issues won awards at festivals throughout Brazil. In 1998, Eduardo gave us our first grandson, Miguel. Holding him in my arms for the first time was like closing a circle, like receiving confirmation that, despite everything, life had been worth it. "Grandma, tell me the story," he asked when he started talking. And I told them. Made-up stories, fairy tales, Brazilian legends, the same stories that my mother Jacqueline told me, that Mrs. Teresa continued to tell me, that now I was passing it on, keeping alive this chain of love that had crossed generations. Clara gave me 2 more grandchildren, twins Luia and Teresa, born in 2003. Yes, one of them was named after that extraordinary woman who saved my life. When Clara told me that she was pregnant with twins and that one of them would be named Teresa, I cried like I hadn't cried in years. She deserves this tribute, Clara explained. Without her, I wouldn't even exist. It was true. Without Dona Teresa's courage and determination, I probably would not have survived those terrible days. I wouldn't have met Ricardo, I wouldn't have had my children. I wouldn't be here today telling you this story. In 2005, Ricardo was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. It was as if the ground disappeared beneath my feet. He, who had always been my safe haven, my rock, now needed me to be strong for both of us. The battle lasted almost 2 years. Chemotherapy, radiotherapy, surgeries. We fight with all the weapons available. We took turns at the hospital. Me, Eduardo, Clara, even the oldest grandchildren. We didn't leave him alone for a minute. "You didn't give up on life after everything you went through," he told me one night in the hospital during one of his rare bouts of recovery. "It taught me that we can always start over, no matter how difficult it seems. Now I'm trying to remember that lesson, but some battles we can't win, no matter how hard we fight." Ricardo left home one morning in June 2007, as he had asked, holding my hand and with his children around. His last word was my name. The morning for Ricardo was different from all the others he had experienced. I didn't have the horror that accompanied the loss of my mother, nor the emotional complexity when I learned of my father's death, nor even the deep, more serene sadness of Dona Teresa's departure. It was a clean, pure pain, born of a love that had lasted almost 4 decades. A love that had healed me, transformed me, allowed me to be the person I could have been if trauma hadn't interrupted my childhood. In the months that followed, I found comfort in my children, in my grandchildren, in the work I continued to do. Little by little, I learned to live without Ricardo, to carry him in my heart, without his physical absence being a constant pain. In 2010, at the age of 63, I officially retired, but I didn't stop working. I started giving talks at schools, universities, community centers. He talked about education, about signs of abuse, about the importance of attentive adults in the lives of vulnerable children. I didn't tell my personal story, I wasn't ready for that yet, but everything I said was informed by her. That same year, Clara surprised me with a gift that would change my life again. "Mom, I want to make a documentary about Dona Teresa," she announced during a Sunday lunch. "About women like her, who save lives silently, without recognition." The idea moved me deeply. Dona Teresa deserved to be remembered. Celebrated. Your courage and kindness deserved to be known by the world. The documentary Invisible Angels was released in 2012 and won several awards. I told you the story of 5 women who, like Dona Teresa, had risked everything to protect children at risk. My story was there, told not by me, but by Clara, with respect and sensitivity. It was the first time that people outside my inner circle of family knew what had happened to me in Joinville so many years ago. After the launch, something unexpected happened. I started receiving letters, emails, messages from people who had seen the documentary and identified with my story. Women and men who had been through similar situations, who carried similar scars, who wanted to share their experiences, their healing journeys. It was overwhelming at first. I wasn't prepared for that flood of emotions, for the weight of so many painful stories. But little by little I realized that this was also a gift, an opportunity to transform my experience into something that could help others, just like the work I was already doing, but in a more direct, more personal way. I started replying to each message individually. Then I accepted invitations to join support groups, to share my story at survivor meetings. It was painful at times to relive those memories, but also incredibly liberating. "You saved my life today," a 20-year-old woman told me after one such encounter. "I thought it would never be possible to have a normal life after what I went through, but looking at you, seeing everything you've built, I realize it is possible." Those words moved me deeply. I realized that my story of pain had become a story of hope for others. That Donna Teresa's legacy continued to live on not only in my children and grandchildren, but in each person who found strength in my journey to continue their own. In 2015, at the age of 68, I wrote a book. It was not a full autobiography, but an account of my experience as a survivor and the work I had done over the decades. After the storm, it became a small phenomenon translated into several languages, used in psychology and social work courses. Today, at 78 years old, I look back and see a life I never imagined I would have. A full, rich, meaningful life. I have 2 extraordinary children, 5 wonderful grandchildren. Yes, 2 more came after the twins and even a newborn great-granddaughter, little Jacqueline, in honor of my mother. I live alone, in a comfortable house, full of books and photographs. I miss Ricardo every day, of course, but I've learned to live with the longing. My children and grandchildren visit me constantly, filling the house with life and noise. The broken girl from Joinville, who thought she would never be whole again, built a full life, a loving family, a legacy of protection and care, not despite the trauma, but transforming it into strength, into purpose, into love. I never went back to Joinville, I didn't want to. Some bridges don't need to be rebuilt. But I forgave not for them, who never asked for forgiveness, but for myself, because hatred is too heavy a burden to carry for a lifetime. The promise I made to my mother in that cemetery before leaving for Porto Alegre was fulfilled. I survived, I became strong, I built a life she would be proud to see, and most importantly, I broke the cycle. My children, my grandchildren, my great-granddaughter. None of them will know from personal experience the kind of horror I have known. They grew up and will grow up surrounded by love, respect, and security. This is my greatest victory, my greatest legacy. My dear ones who are watching me today, if this story touched your heart, I ask that you leave your like and subscribe to the channel. Each entry gives me the strength to continue sharing these memories, which are not always easy to relive, but which can help someone who is going through difficult times. And don't forget to join our WhatsApp group. The link is there in the video description. Every day we send real stories from other grandmothers who, like me, faced challenges in life and managed to overcome them. These are stories that will give you strength, inspire you, show you that it is always possible to start over, no matter how difficult it seems. A loving hug from Grandma Janina, who learned that the scars we carry do not define who we are, but what we choose to do with them. Yes. Always remember, the greatest revenge against those who tried to destroy you is to live a full, happy, and meaningful life. That's what I did and that's what I wish for each of you. That's what I did and that's what I wish for each of you. That's what I did and that's what I wish for each of you. That's what I did and that's what I wish for each of you. That's what I did and that's what I wish for each of you. That's what I did and that's what I wish for each of you.